Hi everybody, welcome to week 3. A couple reminders, you have some upcoming assignments due and I'm just going to overview that. You have an outline due on the 29th, which is during week 3. You have a works cited page due on the 5th of July, which is week 4, and a paper due on the 11th of July, which is week 5. Just so you know, I placed drop boxes on Canvas for all of those assignments, so you can put in either a Word document or a PDF into that Dropbox. Also, you have a test that you're going to take on July 1st, which is also at the end of week 3. And just so you know, this test has 60 questions. You have 90 minutes to answer. 40 of the questions are from the week 3 notes, and then 20 of the questions are from week 1 and 2. Okay? Also, I've already posted quiz number 3, and you can take that ahead of time, but just so you know, that's available. Something weird was happening with Canvas when I was writing these tests and quizzes. For whatever reason, it wouldn't let me add in the last question, so it might look like it's worth 118 points or worth 58 points. Not quite sure. Quiz number 3 is available, okay? A few of the bigger topics this week that I want to talk about. The first one is iconoclasm. This was an issue that started to develop between the East and the West, and it's basically over the issue of religious objects, you know, like statues, Stations of the Cross, any kind of artwork. And in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, the people there started to believe that this was a form of idolatry and that people weren't being loyal to God and basically disobeying the commandment by looking at this artwork. People in the West felt like the artwork kind of mediated their relationship with God, gave them an image to look at to help them imagine God, that it enhanced their spiritual life and it did not distract them from their worship of God. And so basically in the East, there were some emperors who mandated that all that religious art, statues, all of those things be destroyed. And in the West, they maintained those things, but they couldn't agree on that issue, which you see kind of this rising conflict between the East and the West. There were certainly other issues. The language of the Mass, what language should be used, what the Mass should look like was different. Also, they definitely disagreed on the role of the Pope. In the East, they had a person who was called the Patriarch of Constantinople. And in their viewpoint, the Pope and the Patriarch should be equal to each other. In the West, they saw the Pope as the head of the church and the Patriarch under them. And so you see these rising problems between the East and the West, which ultimately leads to the Great Schism, meaning a great split between those two churches. Today we have what we call the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, and there's lots of variations on the Orthodox Church, but basically we never have reunited as a church. Another big thing in this unit is the advent of Islam. This all started with a man whose name was Muhammad. Muhammad went to this cave where he started seeing visions where he says the angel Jibril, or what we would call the angel Gabriel, appeared to him and kind of revealed to him God's inspiration. And Muhammad couldn't read or write, so he memorized everything Angel Jibril told him, and someone else wrote it down as he dictated it to them. This is known as the Quran. The Quran is a sacred writing to the Islamic people, and it might surprise you, but the Quran would include some stories that are part of the Christian Jewish tradition as well. Part of Islam is that they do believe that there is one God. They also don't believe that Muhammad is God, but just a prophet of God. They also believe in Jesus and some of the Christian beliefs, okay? But as Islam started to spread, one of their beliefs was that they should spread Islam everywhere, which different people have translated to mean that you do this through nonviolent or violent ways. This is what they call jihad. And this is has been since translated as a holy war and believed by some people to be acceptable form of spreading Islam. This eventually led to the Crusades because Islam started in Arabia, but near the Holy Land, and they took over the Holy Land. And so they were making it near to impossible for people to travel on pilgrimages to the Holy Land. So in the beginning, when Pope Urban II got people to get behind this idea of the Crusades, it did seem like a good idea. They were going to take back the Holy Land. And it was a lot of the lower class, simple people who were the Crusaders. And they really bought into this idea of doing that. And the first crusade was really a valiant effort to try to retain the Holy Land. But every crusade after that was really more about gaining power, money, land, and they really lost the idea of it. The first crusade was successful. The successive crusades were not nearly as successful. And in the end of the crusades, the Islamic people still maintained control of the Holy Land. And, you know, if you ask different people, there were somewhere between 4 and 8 crusades. There were at least 4 of them. Another important person at this time was Charlemagne, who was a great Christian leader. He was great because Christianity was very important to him, and therefore he was a real good political power too, so therefore it really elevated Christianity to its highest peak probably in that time period. Another person I want to touch on was St. Francis of Assisi, one of my favorite people, my patron saint. St. Francis of Assisi was living in Assisi, Italy. He was the son of wealthy parents. And at one point, he heard God calling him to build his church. And he took this to mean that literally, so he actually built a church. And he used his family's money to do that. According to legend, his father, when he found out he used the family's money, was upset, took Francis to court, and there's this really dramatic, legendary scene where St. Francis of Assisi stripped off all of his clothes, denounced his father's wealth and wealth in general, walked out of the courtroom naked, and adopted this life of total poverty, absolute poverty, and started his own order, who were really dedicated to this kind of idea of absolute poverty and really helping the people, the poor in their midst. One thing St. Francis of Assisi said that's so wonderful is he said, always preach the gospel and when necessary use words. And so he was really active in his faith, and his faith really showed through his actions. Another hugely important person that you're going to read about is St. Thomas Aquinas and scholasticism. Thomas Aquinas was a person who was able to wed reason and logic with faith and religion, and he did this with a very logical way of arguing, where he used proofs. If you've taken a geometry class, you kind of know what that is, but he basically logically proved faith and religion. One of his most famous things is 5 proofs that God exists. And so that kind of highlights some of the people and events you'll read about this week. Have a blessed week. I will talk to you next week.